and welcome to this very special episode of Trojan Poetry. It's very special because I have not read this poem all the way through, and Mike hasn't read it at all. So we're going to see...
We're going to see Dumb and Dumber here.
We're both in the hot seats.
Yeah, right.
But what I did read, I liked. And
okay.
We're going to see if it
and that going. Was the title?
Yeah. All right, so this is called Beckoned by Forrest Gander. Let's see how it goes.
All right.
At which point my grief sounds ricocheted outside of language, something like a drifting swarm of bees. At which point, in the tetric silence that followed, I was swarmed by those bees and lost consciousness. At which point, there was no way out for me either. At which point, I carried on in a semicoma, dreaming I was awake, avoiding friends and puking, plucking stingers from my face and arms. At which point, her voice was pinned to a backdrop of vaporous color. At which point, the crane's bustles flared. At which point, coming to, I knew I'd pay the whole flagpole fare. At which point, the driver turned and said, "It doesn't need to be your fault for it to break you." At which point, without any lurching commencement, he began to play a vulture-bone flute. At which point, I grew old, and it was like ripping open the beehive with my hands again. At which point, I conceived a realm more real than life. At which point, there was at least some possibility in which I didn't believe, of being with her once more. Okay, so I think it paid off.
So this is a love poem. This is a love poem.
It reminds me of the poem we just did about the scout leader.
Yes.
And it reminds me of the poem about the wasp's nest, where the guy keeps reaching into the wasp's nest.
Yes, over and over, and it's like fascinating. It's like fascinating.
One more hand, remember?
One more hand.
You can do it.
You can do it. Well, two things just jump out at me right away. One, magical realism. Just because it's just accepted that all of these psychedelic, crazy, bizarre things are happening. And two is the anaphora, right? The repetition of at which point.
Anaphora.
If you will.
If you look up anaphora on YouTube of how to pronounce it, that's how they pronounce it.
Anaphora.
Anaphora.
And every year I have students that go, so I got this anaphora here,
Anaphora.
Anaphora. Well, I like the anaphora because it's just right from the beginning. At which point? Okay, so it's like it's almost like the poem began further up. It's like you jump in the middle, and it seems like, if you say at which point, you were saying something before that. So they just throw you right in here. The bees motif also keeps popping up. At which point I grew old, and it was like ripping open the beehive with my hands again. So he was swarmed by the bees. He was stung. He starts plucking them out of his face and arms. And then again, he wants to do it again, right? Or it feels like he's doing it again. And the bees originally are his grief sounds outside of language.
I love that grief sounds.
Yeah. I mean, I just picture someone either rolling around in beds, just crying, screaming, like they used to hire professional mourners to come to the funeral and wail. It's kind of like that kind of a thing. What's your take on tetric silence?
Well, I thought of Tetris.
Yeah, Tetris. So does that mean little cubes are creating silence? I guess we'll have to educate ourselves on that one.
I don't know.
But the just like the poem we read in the previous episode, the person that's being referred to suddenly appears about halfway in, at which point her voice was pinned to a backdrop of vaporous color. And then it becomes... It doesn't need to be your fault for it to break you. It doesn't need to be your fault.
That's what the taxi driver says.
Yeah, right. This random guy who's playing a vulture-bone flute at some point.
Right.
Like Conan the Barbarian.
Ominous.
Yeah, right. That doesn't sound too good. It doesn't need to be your fault for it to break you. So this person is beating themselves up over how this relationship ended. Right. And the guy is saying, hey, even if you stop beating yourself up, it could still affect you, break you. I mean, that's a strong way to say it. And
here's my question. So the title is Beckoned, which means that something is beckoning.
Something's calling you.
Right? Or this person is being beckoned. And is it at the end, is it answered at the end, like what is beckoning is the possibility in which they didn't believe that being together once more. Like,
mm-hmm.
they want to... I mean, obviously the structure hit me right away, the anaphora,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then I was like, well, what is doing the beckoning? And now upon finishing the poem...
It makes more sense.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense because that answers the at which point, right? I was beckoned, at which point... I was beckoned by the idea of being with her once more, at which point my whole world turned into this crazy kaleidoscopic... I carried on in a semicoma, dreaming I was awake, avoiding friends and puking. I mean, it's just horrible, like image after image.
But then you get to
and very menacing.
Conceived a realm more real than life, right? Almost like an Annabelle Lee, like...
Yeah, at which point there was at least some possibility. Every day I went down to the sea and laid myself down by the grave of Annabelle Lee.
That would be a good one to pair with this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Forrest Gander.
Mm-hmm.
Be sure to check out our webpage at trojanpoetrydgn.blogspot.com for a complete list of episodes, or follow us on Twitter at trojanpoetrydgn.